Welcome to Happy Homes and Gardens. I'm your host. My name is Daphne Royce. I am a real estate broker, architecture, and interior designer. Harry Santa-Olalla has been called the best auctioneer and has raised more than $500 million for nonprofits. Harry has a unique ability to draw something out of everyone. Let's welcome Harry and hear his stories. Welcome, Harry.
Hi, Daphne. It's great to be here.
Please tell us who you are and why you choose a career as an auctioneer.
Funnily enough, the career actually chose me because I had absolutely no intention of becoming an auctioneer. I sort of accidentally ended up on stage one day at an event, mainly to help a client out that was utilizing a fundraising platform that I was working with at the time. And I sort of ended up on stage to help them fundraise using the platform. That morphed into, can you sell some items while you're up there? The audience seems to respond pretty well to you, which then very quickly became my career. So that's how it happened. It was certainly an accident, but one that I'm really glad happened because I love what I do. It really brings together some of my favorite things, the performance side, the sales side, and of course, the icing on the cake is helping these charities raise, lots more money.
What would you choose your career if you have a choice?
If I could be anything, probably an actor, if I'm completely honest. Like my mum always says that it's not a coincidence that I sort of went into technology and ended up on stage. It seems like, most roads were going to lead to some type of performance, some type of on-stage performance. So, and by acting, I mean, on stage. I think that's the most appealing to me. A live audience is something I really feed off. So probably acting or some type of performance, maybe presenting. I'm not entirely sure.
Maybe someone will choose you for that one day.
But I'm getting more and more requests for it to do presenting and hosting and that sort of thing. Which I'm very happy to entertain. But if I'm completely honest, I didn't realize it, but auctioneering is a lot more fun because you get that stage fun and interaction with the audience, but you also get the opportunity to do the sales. You never know how it's going to go. There's an excitement to that, and there's something that really sort of lights me up. I really enjoy it.
I know you have raised so much money. Do you set goals for every live auction you host?
Oh, absolutely. Every single auction I have meticulously gone through with the client, what we're looking for in terms of goals, what our aspirations are for the overall campaign. Huge part of my role is, what you see on stage and what you saw on stage recently with the American Heart Association, that's really just the end of the campaign. The campaign starts when I get to work with a client, building out the runs of show and looking at the ebbs and flows of the fundraising narrative and making sure that we are set up for success. So I'm just executing the plan we put in place on stage. And part of that plan is setting goals for each of the items. Another goal I love to measure is the level of audience participation. That's a massive goal of mine. It's not just about maximizing revenue. It's giving everyone a chance to contribute something to the evening.
You did it very well.
Thank you.
I see people just couldn't resist you.
Thank you.
How did you master your skill to make people raise their paddles?
It's learning on the job. They're definitely, there are training camps, I think, and all sorts of licenses and certificates and all those sorts of things that exist out there. I personally have never really gone down that road. I have worked it out along the way. I've really enjoyed honing that craft and learning how to read the room and ensuring that I'm, not outstaying my welcome on stage, bringing enough energy and excitement to whatever it is I'm doing on stage, whether that's an auction or an appeal or a combination of both or hosting. And I really think that if people have a smile on their face, they're going to spend a lot more money. In fact, I don't think it. I know. I've got enough experience now to know that the audience will not spend more money if you bully them into it or if you guilt them into it or whatever. It doesn't, that's not how it works. You've got to entertain them. You've got to keep that room on side. And that's half the battle, really, because in an auction, realistically, unlike at the sort of auctions you'd think of traditionally with antiques and art and all that sort of stuff, that room is full of people who are there to buy antiques and art. So they are very attentive. In the rooms I'm on stage at, only maybe 5% of the audience can even afford what I'm selling. The other 95%, they're just there to watch. Well, they guess, right? They're not there to watch the auction. They're there to sort of, add value to the room and be part of the event. But most of them are not able to participate in the auction. So I always say to an audience, to a client, if the audience is talking and getting in the way of the auction, that's on me, because I haven't entertained them enough for them to stop talking. So a big part of the role is getting that room on side, swept up in the moment, and enjoying the process of actually watching and partaking via the sort of reactions they give to the bidding. And that's something I think you can't really teach at a school or give a certificate towards. That is just, getting the reps in hours and hours and hours on stage at hundreds and hundreds of events over the years and learning as you go. And, they're not all wildly successful like you saw. And, fortunately, the vast majority are, but every so often you have really tough nights, and that's where you learn the most.
I think you not only know the room, you also read people's mind. I think your skill is push those people to decide that you really want them to be.
Yeah, I think you can definitely see it in people's eyes where which buttons to press. There are some people who love bidding competitively because there's an ego to it. There are some people who are very clearly just being altruistic for the organization. And there are some people who have the fear in their eyes that they're actually going to win it. That's a problem. So learning to read those eyes are really important. Learning to see when people are leaning into what you're putting on, the show you're putting on, that's super, super important. And again, that's just something it's like muscle memory. It's something you learn over time, over years of putting in the performances over the years. That really is something that is very, very hard to explain.
As a fundraising consultant, what do you mostly advise people on?
Advise them on the run of show, the ebbs and flows of a fundraising event. I always try to empathize with the audience. I always want to make it clear to the client that you are very emotionally invested as the client, as a representative of the organization, but most of your audience are not as emotionally invested. So you need to empathize with them and make sure that you're keeping that run of show really nice and tight and efficient. No one's ever gone to a gala event and then, had a great night and at the end of it sort of said, well, it was a fantastic evening. I just wish it was longer. Like, no one's ever said that at a gala event. So you got to be mindful of that. You've got to keep it nice and tight. I advise them on how best to tell their story so that we're setting up the why are you giving. I advise them on how best to put me on stage earlier on in the evening. Usually clients will make the mistake, when I first joined, of putting me right at the end of the run of show, like the climactic ending to the fundraiser. That's not the best place to have me. Nice and early is actually where you're going to get the best results. And then the mechanics of giving. How do people give? How to make it easy for guests to give. That is a huge part of my role as a consultant.
Do you consult then on the live auction items?
Yeah, absolutely. Gone are the days where people are happy to spend, thousands of dollars on signed memorabilia and stuff like that. Since COVID, people have really, really gravitated towards experiences with people they love. One of a kind experiences, unique opportunities. They do the absolute best, and I do a huge amount of consultation on those types of experiences.
Do you travel all over the world to do your job?
Yep, loads and loads of travel, mainly in America and mainly on the East Coast, just because of the volume. Yeah, I make my way over to the West Coast a bunch, in Texas and Boston, and sort of fundraising hubs around the country.
Do you go out of US to
Yeah.
Europe?
Back home in London, I've been on stage, fundraising in London, north of the border in Canada. I do a bunch of large events over there, working with Givergy as well. I mean, it's kind of it really is sort of travel dependent. It's just the timing. That's my biggest hurdle is the time it takes to get to and from events. That's the only thing keeping me tethered really to New York. The bulk of the fundraising is here in New York City, where I live.
What was the most memorable event you attend?
Oh, the most memorable event I've attended. I mean, it really depends on from what angle you're looking at. If you were to Google my name, yes, the big glitzy, glammy events will come up. I do, City Harvest, for example, up on stage with John Legend singing to the audience, which was fun. I did Rihanna's Black Diamond Ball. I support Anna Wintour's God's Love We Deliver event every year. That's always got a really star-studded event sort of audience. In April, I was actually fortunate enough to host the auction that Taylor Swift attended. So it's quite rare to have Taylor Swift, probably the most famous human being on planet Earth right now, in my audience, interacting with me for 40 minutes. And her boyfriend, Travis Kelce, got up on stage and helped me out selling tickets. And it was wild. It was a wild, wild night. So from that perspective, the most sort of high end, most exciting in terms of the faces in the audience, it's probably one of those events, the Black Diamond Ball or the UNICEFs or some of those huge names that you would sort of read about in the news. But if I'm honest, the ones that are most memorable to me are the ones where I've had the biggest impact fundraising wise. And some of those huge events, you're raising millions of dollars, but it's not hard to raise millions of dollars when you've got an audience full of multimillionaires and billionaires. Where I have a massive impact to those organizations looking to raise 100 grand and we raise 200 or 300 grand. It's as a percentage of what they're raising, it's much less, but to the organization, it's dramatically more impactful. And I've got a handful of events where, I mean, it's absolute food for the soul. It's the best feeling. I can draw on that feeling very, very easily. One of them was Eagle Academy, which is an academy here in New York for young men. And, I think the goal was $50,000 that night in the appeal. And we raised nearly $240,000. And the client was crying at the end of the night. And it was just the best feeling ever. It was so awesome. So those are the most memorable for me, if I'm completely honest.
How much time you normally stay on the stage?
It can be 20 minutes. It can be up to an hour. It really depends on the number of items, the goals we're trying to raise, and also the amount of interactions on stage, because that's really time exhaustive. So, if I'm up on stage and each item has, some type of, for example, City Harvest, every item was a in-home celebrated chef experience that was selling for over 100 grand. One sold for $800,000. Each experience, the chefs came up on stage and talked through what we were going to be doing. So that's a lot of time, but there's only 5 items in that auction, but it lasted, nearly an hour. But it was super engaging because of who was up on stage and all the rest of it. So every event is different, but the reality is you should try and be as efficient with your time as possible.
What was the largest single donation you have experienced?
The largest donation I've ever seen is $5 million.
Wow.
But the largest auction item was a lunch with Tim Cook, which sold for $1 million. And that was for college track this time last year, actually.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I actually do see him in a coffee shop in my area.
You see what Tim Cook?
Yes, I
Well,
did.
if you sat down with him and had a quiche in that cafe, then you are likely saving yourself $1 million because someone has paid $1 million for exactly that experience in one of my auctions.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm in the area has a lot of tech celebrities.
Oh, absolutely. That's why if I'm flying to the West Coast, it's usually in your neighborhood.
Is it differences between people here in my neighborhood and your neighborhood?
In New York? Oh yeah,
Yes.
huge. That's one thing I love about America is every audience is different in every state. I mean, a Texas audience is wildly different to a New York audience. And I know how to get the Texans all fired up. All I need to tell them is that, they're getting outperformed by New Yorkers. And, that gets them in a place of really competitive bidding. San Francisco is a much more sort of not laid back, but it's a less aggressive form of fundraising than New York. New York is super efficient. They want to get it done, but they also want it to be fun and kind of, there's a bite to New York, that doesn't quite exist in San Francisco. I don't know. Not one isn't better than another. That's for sure. And of course, in Canada, the audience is super respectful, so you never have a problem with a chatty audience. Whereas, a local sort of dance company in Brooklyn, which I've done recently, was just wild scenes. And so yeah, every audience is different, and they're very much a reflection of the communities in which they live and operate.
Just curious, when is your busiest season?
March to June, half of June, and then from mid-September to mid-December. I mean, those are the two fundraising seasons, and it's wildly busy. In May this year, I had 27 events across
You
9 states.
you work every day, mostly.
Yeah, that included 3 or 4 days where I was doing 2 in a day. So it wasn't quite every day, but it certainly felt that way.
So you take a break in between those two big chunk seasons.
Yes, and I'm in one now. That's exactly right.
And what are your hobbies other than work?
I play a lot of sport. That's what I do. I do a lot of paddle, a lot of tennis, a lot of squash, a lot of climbing, hiking, trekking, biking. Um, I like to do a lot of physical activity, and I travel a huge amount, and I play a lot of golf as well. So I try not to waste a minute. I think that's more or less that'll be written on my gravestone, I hope. Never wasted a minute. I really like doing things, being with people and traveling and exercising and just constantly being on the move. I think one of the best parts of my job, if I'm completely honest, Daphne, is it gives me a perspective on life that is absolutely drenched in gratitude. I do so many events a year where I'm sat in the audience listening to mothers and fathers on stage talk, bereaved parents talking about kids with cancer who sadly passed, or seeing a blind person get up on stage to talk about the struggles they have, or the American Heart Association, where one of the survivors bravely got on stage and told her story at the age of 27, having a heart attack. You can't be in these audiences hundreds of times in a year, 100+ times in a year, and not, even just through osmosis, you can't be in the audience and not feel unbelievably grateful to be just healthy and able to see, to smell, to taste, to exercise, to walk, to all these things, because so many people aren't in that position, and I'm exposed to it on almost a nightly basis, and it's just an amazing thing.
Sounds like your job gave you a lot of motivation for your life.
Without question, without question. And I think it is a huge upside to it. It's a huge blessing to be able to support these organizations, help them raise lots of money, but also to learn about how I mean, it's just amazing how, and by the way, that's, you know, a lot of the New Yorkers who are in the audience at these events, you know, they're very work driven. It's amazing. It's what's, you know, New York has been a huge part of why the West and San Francisco, you know, the developments that have happened over the last several decades, you know, have come from a lot of the investments made right here in this city, and people can get very hyper focused on that and not necessarily see the wood for the tree. So these events, they might go to once or twice a year, and, you know, it might have an impact, but when it's your job, you're in the audience most nights, and it's just it's impossible to do my job and not have that level of gratitude and empathy to the people you're serving.
What is your philosophy of life?
Well, genuinely not to waste a minute. Like, try not to sweat the small things. Life's just way too short to get too caught up in things that really don't matter. That for me, I think, is the biggest philosophy. You can operate on a, you know, perhaps a bit of an overshare here, but I'm 9.5 years sober. So I'm in a program that basically is focused on making sure you're keeping your side of the street clean, apologizing where you mess up, and just living a life full of gratitude. And if you can do those things, you're going to have a pretty happy life. You can be grateful for the things you have and not constantly pining for things that you don't. And, you know, don't sweat the small things. It's just not worth it, you know.
If you can change one thing in your life, what would it be?
I wish I had the same opportunity and career potential in the UK, so I could be living in and around my family and friends back home. That's the only thing I'm, you know, it's tough not having that immediate access to them. But it would be on one condition: the weather has to improve in the UK. That would be my one stipulation. But of course, I'm fortunate enough that my career is going very well, and I'm able to fly home a lot, and also have my family fly out to me. So, you know, I'm certainly not, you know, if you gave me the chance, I would love it, but I still have it really good.
I'm in San Francisco Bay Area in the peninsula. And I often recall we probably had the best weather in San Francisco Bay. We actually paying the weather taxes.
Oh, really? I love that.
Definitely not the weather that you see in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Sunny day, just perfect temperature.
Yeah, I honestly, I am often reminded of how good you have it on the West Coast when I fly over there. But I'm also a seasonal person. I do love that New York is very seasonal. Some people don't love that, but I love it. I love knowing that when it's going to be winter, it is cold and it's going to be tough. And when it's summer, it's hot and it's going to be clear. And when it's the fall, you got to get right up into the mountains and see the leaves change. And when it's spring, you got to be out there trying to enjoy the golf if you can. Like, every season's different, and I actually really love that about New York. The reason why the London weather is so tough is it's so dreary. You know, the rain is sort of just in the air. It's not coming down hard. It's just around you. It's quite grey during many months of the year. So if that would only improve and it was a nice sort of crisp weather in London and clear in the summer and crisp in the winter, I think it would be the best city in the world to live in.
Well, you have 4 seasons, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Where is your website or your Instagram handle, and how can people contact you for your services?
Absolutely. So you can use my website, which is www.harrysanta.com, or my Instagram handle is @harrysanta, and you can connect with me either way.
Well, thank you very much, Harry. That was a very informative interview, and I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Daphne. Hope to see you in an audience soon.
Yes, I hope to see you again soon and safe travels.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.